Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Garo Gazarian. I am a vice chair of this association here in Los Angeles. And I want to welcome you all to our 23rd annual conference and gala banquet dinner this evening. Chairman Emeritus Vikan Simonian, I'm happy to have you among us. Yes. It's always not. I was keeping my voice down, actually, because I'm trying to live down the reputation of an attack dog. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. As I was saying, Chairman Emeritus Vikan Simonian, thank you for being here with us. Mr. Chairman Edwin Minassian, ex officio Chairwoman Sonia Nercesian, members of the Executive Board of Governors, welcome. I see scattered applause. You can applaud. What can I say after the morning session? I'd like to say I'm speechless. I'd be lying. I'm not speechless, but I will remain speechless. I will give a follow-up with our esteemed guest of honor, Edik Bagdasaryan, this afternoon around 3 o'clock about my own observations during my 10, 11 days in Armenia before, during, and after the parliamentary elections there. For now, I am honored, pleased, and humbled to recognize a few dignitaries, none greater than Wali Karabian, who will address us a little later. I'm not going to say anything about Mr. Karabian. I will invite the person to introduce him, who I model myself after, who happens to be probably 20 years, if not more, younger than me. I want to welcome David Balabanyan, our first chair of the Bar Association, dating back a few decades. Honorable Zaven Sinanyan, a former chairman of the Bar, judge of Los Angeles County Superior Court. Judge Amy Lugasian, a fellow board member. Vice Chair from Canada, my friend Harry Dikranyan. I see you eating. I'm hungry. I'm going to try and make it fast. Antranik Kasparian from the Tufenkian Foundation is always a friend of the Armenian Bar and never says no to us and comes and joins us. Thank you, Antranik. And I always stand here, I don't have notes, and I always sit down and somebody tells me you forgot this person or that person. So I'm going to take a few seconds, survey the tables around me, but without need to any such survey, I can say that our own local legend, known the world over, Harut Sasunyan, was here. Is he here? Where are you, Harut? Oh, there you are, right in front of me. See? Sometimes the truth hits you in the face and you just can't see it. Or sometimes Harut will hit you in the face, you can't see it. Harut, thank you for being here. Harut will be addressing us this afternoon briefly about a brilliant idea that he had, that he shared with us, and we wanted him to share with all of you this afternoon. Also, Oshin Keshishian, what are we calling Oshin these days, Harut? The Miracle Man? Yeah. The Miracle Boy, yes, he's young. Oshin had a very life-threatening situation, but he threatened that situation and he's alive. We have with us also, I believe I'm saying this correctly, Senior Deputy District Attorney Jackie Lacey, who is a candidate for the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office upcoming elections. Welcome. We do have a friend of mine and a judicial candidate, Berge. Stand up, Berge. Barsegian, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I always refer to him as Berge. Thank you. And yes. I know what I am. We all know what we are. I am a member of Maba PAC. I'm the Armenian Mexican that is part of Maba PAC's Judicial Evaluations Committee, and I'm pleased to say that Maba PAC endorsed Berge Barsegian among many other worthy candidates that we evaluated. Maba PAC, not Armenian Bar. Armenian Bar doesn't do things like that. Other than Berge, whose presence is welcome here as it was last night and the rest of the day, let me see. Anybody else I want to make uncomfortable? I see a former Vice Chair, Steve Dedeyan of the Armenian Bar Association. I'm glad you're here with us, Steve. Thank you. And I have to say there are two people here who are at conferences as far back as my first conference that I attended in 1992 in Washington, D.C. They are not lawyers, but they are the producers of the greatest lawyer, the greatest friend, the greatest human being anyone could ever come into contact with, the parents of our own Chairman Emeritus Vikin Simonian, Hrant and Mrs. Simonian. Thank you for being such great supporters of our organization. And I would be remiss if I did not mention our former executive director and still a very active member, Beri Jamgochian. Beri, thank you for remaining with us despite your busy life. Also, our former executive director, Lucy Barbetian, my boss on the Civil Service Commission in the city of Glendale, where she advises me every time I'm about to violate the Brown Act. She does, which I'm still trying to figure out what that is.
You like that?
Well, I'm sure I forgot somebody, but I apologize if I did. I would be mentioning each and every one of you and say something about somebody. I'm known to do that. So I'll stop and I'll introduce the young man, and he is a young man, who will be introducing our speaker for this luncheon. I supported this young man when he ran for elected office in the form of the city attorney of Los Angeles, for the city of Los Angeles. And he did very well. I can't comment on the elections, the appropriateness of it or not. I did not observe the elections. I voted in those elections. But I could say without hesitation, for someone young, bright, and able to do each and everything that those of us in the private sector can do, and drive forward, driven by economic motivation, he did not do that. He is in public service. He is a deputy city attorney. He remains a deputy city attorney. And he battled with perceived giants in our city, the city that is home to population that is larger than many countries in the world. And he came in third, if I'm not mistaken. He came in third, a very respectable third. And I personally know that at least one of the people who was ahead of him tried to take his support, sought his support, but Michael remained neutral after he came in third and did not play politics as politicians are known to play, I suppose. Michael was very brave for doing that, and Michael was someone that when I was growing up as a teenager in the slums of Beirut, I thought I would be. But that is not what I became. I am a criminal defense attorney, and I strive to find the issues that are near and dear and noble for my cause, so that I may zealously represent individuals, most of whom I do not find very desirable, quite frankly, but I do so because they're entitled to their best representation, and I try and provide that. But Michael is something else. Michael is something else, and I think he is an example for people a decade older than him, 2 decades older than him, and much older than him, and in fact younger than him. Because public service is something that I discovered in my 40s, and now in my early 50s. I'm happy to have had the opportunity and to be part of public service in some small way, but Michael has found that early in life, and I have high hopes for you, Michael, and I have readiness and preparedness to support you in each and every endeavor because you deserve it. Michael and Miriam, please come up.
Talk about raising their expectations. Thank you, Garo. Every time you introduce me, I don't think you can add any more superlatives than you did before, and you keep on surpassing. I don't know who you're talking about anymore. It's actually my pleasure today to be here to present to you a friend, longtime family friend of my family. Goes back to when he and my dad were college students together at USC, and they had a lifelong friendship that served them both very well. I know my dad found it just immensely gratifying to have Wally to be able to count Wally as a close friend. I think it's really fitting that we introduce him to you today to speak about, he's going to be speaking about Fresno history, but it's fitting to have him here on a day like today when we are focusing so much on civil rights issues that are confronting us in the Republic of Armenia, because today we got the benefit of hearing about the fearlessness of people in Armenia that dare to stand up to authority. Well, today you're going to have the pleasure of listening to perhaps the most fearless man I have had the pleasure to know. There is no fight that is too big for Wally Karabi. He never flinches from a battle. If you are going into a fight, be it electoral, legal, or even on the street, there's nobody else I would rather have in my corner than Wally Karabi. You may not know it by looking at him today, but when he was no. When he was 28, he was elected to serve in the California State Assembly, and that was back in 1966. I'm not going to go through his whole bio because you have the benefit of reading that on your own time. But at the time, he was the third Armenian American elected to office. He did it at a time when he didn't have the benefit of the strength of the ANC behind him. He did it the old-fashioned way, door to door, house by house, handshake by handshake. There was nothing easy about the way he succeeded. It was all through hard work. And that hard work was paid off several years later when he became the youngest majority leader in the California Assembly. He was 33 at the time. That's a record that still stands to this day. And the other thing that I would absolutely be remiss if I went without saying is that unlike some members of our community who feel threatened by future leaders and future generations coming up and wanting to play a role of leadership, both within the Armenian community and in the larger community abroad, some people feel threatened by others who want to participate. Not Wally. Wally, it was always someone that people, whether they're Armenian, non-Armenian, but especially Armenians, can count on. One of his favorite stories he just told at the table, and it's something that I keep in mind. He knows about an incident where Jerry Tarkanian, the great UNLV basketball coach, had on his team, end of the bench, an Armenian fellow, never got into games much. Finally, at the end of the season, a reporter had the guts to ask him, so that Armenian guy at the end of the bench, you just have him on your team because he's Armenian, right? And he said, no, I have him on my team because I'm Armenian. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Wally Karabi.
Thank you, Michael. The late Justice Richard Amarian would be proud, and I'm delighted that you drew the assignment to introduce me. For the 29,783 of you who live in the city of Los Angeles and are registered voters, or the 73,800 of you that live in Los Angeles County who are registered voters, paying attention at election time is an important part of our life. I have a couple of observations before I tell you a little bit about what I call recollections of a Fresno summer. I invited Jackie Lacey to come here today because I believe that we're going to be faced with a runoff election for district attorney. So make your presence known. known to the candidates who are running. And Jackie Lacey is at the top of the list that you should make your views known and your support known. Because when this race, which has many candidates now, narrows into 2 candidates, these candidates are going to be even more hungry for your support than they are now. So make your presence known. Don't forget our issues. And first on the list, as I've been reminding everybody, is poor Hampik Sassoonian, who's been languishing in prison all these years. We need someone with courage to end that odyssey, to end that despicable chapter in California life, where he could have been pardoned many times and wasn't, and where he could have been released many times and wasn't, because a Turkish lobby goes to the parole hearings and influences the parole board. This is something that only a district attorney can stop. And so I urge you to make your views known, and I can tell you that I've noticed a real receptiveness to our cause by Jackie Lacey. Jackie, will you stand up and let us? Now, you know the old line, politics makes strange bedfellows. Ironically, it's her boss, Steve Cooley, who's taken the hardest line against Hampik Sassoonian. But at some point, she will throw off the shackles of Steve Cooley and realize that if she's going to get elected, she has to get elected on her own and not in Steve Cooley's shadow. And so, talk to her. Let her know how that issue cuts through all of us. What a great injustice it was that he was tried and convicted the first time and came within 1 vote of getting the death penalty because the governor of California put into the law a despicable piece of legislation saying that if you killed somebody because of his national origin, you could get the death penalty. But what is the national origin of a Turk? Does anybody know? Because, yes. Thank you. It's a multitude of people. There's no unique one definition. It's a multitude. Turks are Greeks, are Italians, are Armenians forced to convert to their religion. It's everybody. And this law went into effect. Admittedly, he had a different ethnic group in mind when he proposed this when he was a state senator. But this governor did an injustice to us, and that injustice has continued. So help us eliminate that by getting Hampik Sassoonian pardoned and out of prison so he can have some semblance of his life after 30-some years serving in prison. I urge you to participate. Secondly, tonight when you hear Eric Garcetti, keep in mind my words. Keep in mind my words. When my wife was challenged by the Los Angeles City Ethics Commission because she wrote a letter to the 29,783 of us who vote in the city of Los Angeles, reminding them that what a good friend the Amarian family had been to the DeCronian family. The Ethics Commission didn't like that. Didn't like that correspondence. Wanted to have it approved in advance, because people must have been asleep in law school when they studied the First Amendment. And what happened was we became targets in all of that. And we tried to get Eric Garcetti, who had appointed one of the members of the Ethics Commission, to sit down and talk to us about it. He refused repeatedly. Repeatedly. Now, if you think that kind of access is good for a mayor of Los Angeles, you are not on the same page as Walter Karabian. We want accessible candidates, not inaccessible candidates, because there may be a time when we have something to say is of value and has merit. But the closing you off to not talk to anybody about the subject is something that I don't like. I even went to Eric's father, Gil, who was a classmate of mine at SC, undergraduate, and went to him and he said, I can't talk to my son about anything, he said. And he gave me a staff person to talk to, who of course, like her boss, didn't return any phone calls either. So keep that in mind tonight as he pronounces Armenian villages' names correctly and he does other things correctly. Don't be deceived. Now finally, when I went to USC, my mother said, oh, Angela Nishanamarian's boy goes to SC. I didn't know who Angela Nishanamarian were. And I said, well, Mother, who are you talking about? Well, they have a very nice son named Richie Amarian, later to be Justice of the Court of Appeal, Richard Amarian. So what happened is, I said, but Mom, how do you know them? Oh, they're good Dikranaghetsis. This was the only connection. She had never met Michael's grandmother and grandfather, but they both knew they came from Dikranaghet, or for you Bosahais like Edvin Diabakir. And so this is one of the ties between the Karabian and the Dikranian families and the Amarian families. So I'm quite proud to have Richard Amarian's son and Angela Nishan Amarian's grandson introduce me today and be present. Now, I thought what I'd do is give you a little insight into Fresnotsi mentality. You know, for you non-Armenians, when we put the TZI at the end of a name, at the end of a place, it means you're from that place. So if I were to say Beirutsi, like some of you, you would know that they're from Beirut. Well, the most famous place in the United States was Fresno. So we Fresnotsis paid attention to what Fresno was like. Here on this map was drawn by my father when, before they tore down all the homes in the Emerson School area. It has all the original Armenian families and where they live, starting with Krikorian, starting with Mannix, Krikor Ohanian, known to you as Mike Connors, and all the other families are there. They all settled in this one place around Emerson School, Holy Trinity Church, and St. Paul's Church. So if you'd like to come and look at that later, you'll find it a marvel, and I'll bet you some of you will be able to trace your families back into that map. He was a paper boy in that area, and he remembered all the Armenians that took the Fresno, now it's the Fresno B. In those days it was called the Fresno Republican. And so, this is nice. I see a few Fresnotsis out there nodding that remember that the B was called the Fresno Republican back in those days. It's the richest farm community in the world. Fresno County produces more agricultural products than any county in the world to this day. And most of the production is done by Armenian farmers. In 1890, there were 1,000 people living in Fresno. 1,000 in 1890. Back in 1871, 2 Armenians came from Fresno. Frank Normart and John Peters. Frank Normart and John Peters. Now, what were their real names? We're not even sure. But Normart, I don't have to explain to you, I'm doing this for the purpose of the Odars here. Normart in Armenian means new man. So the first Armenian that came to Fresno was Frank Normart, probably Antranik Normart because so many Armenians that had the name Frank were really given the name Antrani by their parents. He came to Fresno and didn't like it. He returned to Philadelphia. In 1874, the Seropian brothers arrived in Fresno. 3 brothers from Boston. They had been sent to Fresno because one of them had tuberculosis and was told by a doctor, go to a place that has a hot, dry climate. And the boy asked where, and he said Fresno. Now, it's true, 3 months out of the year it's a hot, dry climate. The other 9 months out of the year are something else, okay? Cold, even snow sometimes when I was a kid growing up in Fresno. They met discrimination in deeds. There's a famous story about the first development in Fresno, which was the development of Sunnyside Estates on the south side of Fresno, the closest to Los Angeles. Sunnyside Estates was being billed as the big new place where you wanted to go and live and have a beautiful home. Well, guess what? Between Sunnyside Estate and the city of Fresno was a large piece of property owned by Paul Musession. Not Paul Musession, the lawyer of today, but his grandfather, Paul Musession. And so he announced to the city council that he was going to put a pig farm in on his property. And they said, Mr. Musession, how can you do that? How can you do that? The smell goes in a southerly direction. It will wipe out this new development. Well, he said, I don't know anybody who's able to buy property in Sunnyside Estates because there was a deed discrimination. He knew no one who would be able to live there. Fresno City Council quickly got rid of that so that their Sunnyside Estates wouldn't fall into disrepair and bankruptcy. And now, all of them there are Armenians, including my friend Marvin Baxter, who of course was Bagdasarian, whose family lived there in those days, and is my sister's neighbor there in Fresno. And so they all moved out there. Now it's one of the nicest areas in Fresno to live, the Sunnyside Estates. My father used to tell the story. He was a classmate of William Saroyan's. And remember, because we are Beatleses on my father's side, Saroyan was a very proud Beatlese. He wrote a little book called The Road to Beatles. And willed in his will that his ashes should remain held until Beatles was free, and then he wanted his ashes buried in Beatles. Now I think what they've done is half of them have gone to Yerevan, and the other half are being held for someday. Is that right, Oshin?
He buried already. In Fresno.
In Fresno, yes, but he wants them to go to Beatles when Beatles is free.
The first half,
You took to Armenia, that's right, I remember that, to Yerevan. So, what happens now is you come upon the Fresno scene. In the early part of the 20th century, there were 500 Armenian families in Fresno. 500 Armenian families. We have pictures of a 4th of July float with Armenian writing on it, celebrating the 4th of July. As these families, good Americans, but never forgetting their Armenian heritage, kept reminding people of it. And then in the early part of the 20th century and into the 20s and 30s, massive discrimination set in. Massive discrimination. My father told a story of where they went home for lunch one day at Emerson School, which is the center point of all of this. And they came back, and the teacher, it was a cold day, the teacher went and threw open the window and said, I can't stand it anymore. You Armenian children go home for lunch and you eat so much garlic at lunch, I can't take it in this classroom anymore, and she threw open the thing. Well, that had a dramatic impact on people who were eating what their mothers set for them. They all of a sudden felt like they were second-rate citizens in a classroom where Others laughed at them and made fun of them. Lots of fights. Their childhood, what I call the Soroyan generation. Lots of fights, fighting with what they called in those days the Russians. Who knows whether those were German or white Russians or what they were in those days in Fresno. They referred to them as the Russians. And so they began to do something that haunts us to this day. They began to change their names. So, the Tusuzian family changed its name to Tusa. The Peters and Paul families changed their name to Bedrosian and Bogosian. Changed it from Bedrosian and Bogosian to Peters and Paul. Michael's family up there, the Memleketians, changed their name to Memli. The Balutian family changed their name to Cloud. Balut is cloud in Turkish, is it not, Ocean? Okay. The Hatsakorjan family, kind of can't blame these people. Changed their name to Baker, Jim Baker, one of the great Armenian nationalists in Fresno. Okay, family name was Hatsakorjan. That literally means someone who works with bread. The Almasian family changed their name to Mesa. The Garabedians changed their name to Garo and Gary. Lots of Garos in Fresno. Gary, you know Gary Packing Company, the largest packagers of dried fruit in the nation, okay, is my cousin Jim Gary, whose father changed his name from Ed Garabedian to Ed Gary. My Sunday school teacher, Zavart Jermagian, changed her name to Gladys White. Okay? Jermag is white in Armenia. The Terzians and the Tertsakians became Taylor. Lots of my good friends in Fresno, Armenian friends, are named Taylor. Their name was Terzian or Tertsakian. The Devlakian family became the Devlins, other relatives of yours. The Anushian family changed their name to Sweet, literally translated Anusha Sweet. The Aslanian family in Fresno changed their name to Lion. Lion's Packing Company, one of the biggest packing companies in the Central Valley. Their family name was Aslanian. The Yanokian family. The Yanokian family became Enoch. Enoch Packing Company, one of the largest packing companies until its recent bankruptcy in the history of California. Then, as long as I'm going through these names, it just wasn't confined to Fresno. It crept in down here as well. The Philibosians became Phillips. The Varjabedians, this is a classic. 3 Varjabedian brothers. The oldest kept the name Varjabedian. It literally meant a teacher or a tutor, Varjabedian. Okay, the oldest one kept the name Varjabedian. The second one dropped the middle syllable and became Varjan. The third one changed his name to Tudor. Tudor Saliba Construction Company. Arakelian became Astor. One of the 2 first lawyers in Los Angeles. Matthios Farayan kept his name. But Astor Arakelian changed his name to M.A. Astor. These were the first 2 lawyers in Los Angeles, both graduated in the class of 1917 from USC Law School. Now, when you drive to Palm Springs, you see those date farms, the Keklekians and the Haratunians. You don't recognize them by their Armenian names. The Keklekians became Kek, and the Haratunians became Harris. These are the 2 biggest date-producing families down in the Palm Springs area. The Tussonian family became Vanley. Not exactly a translation, but when they came from Van, this is the Grand Teresian's wife, was named Vanley. When they came from Van, they asked him question, how do you spell Tussonian? He couldn't spell it, he couldn't read, he couldn't write in English. So they said, where are you from? He said, Vanley, which means the village of Van. And they put the name Vanley which is their family name. They're Vanetsis from Van, of course. How about this one for a famous one? The Agassians. You probably know the grandson, Andre Agassi. These names were all changed in a desire to get away from the discrimination, the deed restrictions, and the discrimination against them for living. But the funniest one of all, the one I always save for last, was Hagop Asadurian, because he was called jackass by his friends. Hagop is the Armenian word for jack. He was called jackass by all his friends, so he changed his name. Listen to what he did. He changed his name from Hagop Asadurian to Hagop Asadur. He thought he had hidden his Armenian heritage, but he was still called jackass by the Ogars, the non-Armenians or the Ogars. You had a lot of that because they were trying to run away from their heritage. Now, Armenian children, young people in Fresno are asking their parents, how did you do this? Why did you do this? And so they referred to the previous generation. Said, oh, it was done by my father, it was done by my great-grandfather, etc., avoiding responsibility. Now, as all of you lawyers know, name changes are cheap and easy. When somebody comes to you and wants to be identified with us, you can change the name, like Kirken Alyanak did to Kirken Alyanakian. This is something we can all do for the members of our community who want to change. And I didn't go into the names like Minas and Vartan and Tevris and so forth that just dropped the IAN on. Thought they were camouflaging their heritage by using a last name of Minas or Vartan or Tevris. This was Fresno and to a lesser degree Los Angeles. The Guguyans became Gugu. How can you imagine Gugu having a last name like that, changing it from a Guguyan, which at least had some character, not like some kid doing like this on a Halloween trickster or nothing. The most famous two Armenians from Fresno were, of course, General Antranik, the great hero of our forces in Armenia in the war against the Turks, who settled there and died there. And he died, Fresno Republican, had across the headline, 10,000 attend General Antranik's funeral in the Holy Cross, Holy Trinity Armenian Church. He was the most famous of all of them in Fresno. Then, however, came William Soroyan and others of us in the generation after Soroyan. I want to remind you that there were people in that Soroyan generation who didn't change their names. Soroyan being one, who didn't change their name. You weren't going to take their Armenian identity away from them. It didn't matter how to get around a restrictive deed or be able to buy a piece of property. The centerpiece of Fresno is a security bank building, a big, tall building. We've all seen it in Fresno. Okay, for years and years, no Armenian was allowed to lease space in that building. I remember because my cousin Harold Perichon. Now, can you imagine? They changed that from Perichonian to Perichon. Little did they know what Perichon means, okay? So they changed it to a beggar or a poor person living on the streets. He tried to rent space there when he became a young lawyer, and he was refused. Now that building is owned by an Armenian. That building is owned by an Armenian. So you have a lot of changes that's taking place in Fresno, not the least of which is all this is gone. All of this is gone. My grandmother's house is gone. Soroyan's family house is gone. Only thing that's there is Arat Market, we call Kersom's Market, is there, and a couple of other things. You know, in my days growing up, when we'd walk with our grandparents would point out other Armenians, and they would say, these are Dikranagets, they're Mushets. To this day, I remember the Sagatelian family that owns Valley Bakery, that makes all the lavash bread that every restaurant in California uses, the cracker bread. Janet Sagatelian was a classmate of mine. They were Mushets. Now, why would I remember something like that? Because every time we went to that bakery, my grandmother would say they're Mushets. Or that Michael Agopian and his family were Harpetsis. Now, we have a double twist with Michael Agopian and me. Michael Agopian likes to tell the story that his father and my great-uncle, Krikor Karabian, used to talk a lot. And Michael Agopian's father would say, that Krikor Karabian is such a good Armenian, such a good Christian, but I gotta tell you, it's too bad he's a Bitlis. Okay? Because the Agopians were Harpetsis. But little did he know, our uncle used to say the same thing about them. Too bad he's a Harpetsi. Okay. I taught Willie Brown a great line once. Jackie, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but if you do, just too bad. The Harpetsis are known for their dark complexion. And Willie Brown, when he went to the first Armenian event in San Francisco, he got up and he said, when I first met Wally Karabian in the legislature, he asked me if I was a Harpetsi. Well, he brought down the house, of course. He brought down the house. And he's since used that line 1,000 times. Okay. In any case, that's kind of the run of it from Fresno. Let me just give you two little brief legal stories, if I may, and conclude on this. The phrase irreconcilable differences. Did any of you ever wonder how that got in the Family Law Act of 1970? The famous Family Law Act, which is the underpinning of all the divorce law in California. There were two versions. This is in the 2-year period from 1968 through the 1970 election, when the Republicans controlled the legislature. The only 2 years in modern time that the Democrats didn't control one or both houses of the California legislature. It didn't matter who was governor. Okay, Wilson, DeMajian, Brown, Reagan. Democrats controlled the legislature. And what happened was that Jim Hayes, former Los Angeles County Supervisor, a name probably none of you even know, and former Assemblyman from Long Beach, Jim Hayes, put in a bill to revise the divorce law in California. And on the Senate side, Republican Senator Don Grunsky from Santa Cruz put in a bill. The two different versions were not reconciled, and so the rules required that the two bills go to a conference committee made up of 3 members from the Assembly and 3 from the Senate, 2 from the majority party in each house. And those 6 people iron out what is called a conference report. And they report it back to both houses, because for a bill to become law in California, it must pass identically in both houses. Every comma, every period must be the same. And so what happens is, on this conference committee, lo and behold, Wally Karabian was a member of the 3 members in the Assembly who was on the conference committee. Why? Not only was I not an expert in family law or divorce law, I have never had a case. I have never had a case to this day in that field. But I was a seatmate of Jim Hayes, who was the Republican Assemblyman from Long Beach, and he liked me. And so Hayes put me on that conference committee, knowing that I understood the first principle of the legislature, which is if you want to get along, you've got to go along. And he was chairman of the committee, and I was going along with him. So he put me on the committee, and there were 3 Republicans. So I'm sorry, 2 Republicans and 1 Senate on the Senate side of the conference committee, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat on the Assembly side. So we met. Endless debate and discussion. Grunsky did not want to use the phrase no-fault divorce. He was adamant against that. He did not want to use that. This is an interesting piece of California history to you lawyers. He refused to use the phrase no-fault divorce, which was the way it was referred to by everybody in those days. They're debating back and forth. I'm sitting in the corner, wanting to get out of there and get to my office and take care of some constituent matters with people who vote in my district rather than these other 5 people who didn't have a vote in my district. And finally, out of frustration, after hours, I said, what about irreconcilable differences? And Grunsky said, I like that. I like that. It went into the law. Somebody told me the other, and that's the basis of divorce, irreconcilable differences. Somebody told me the other day that there have been 146 appellate cases in California trying to figure out what the legislature meant by that phrase. I have no idea. It was a way to get me out. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. This was wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Before we move in, we're about 10 minutes behind, but we will not go inside until we honor a man that I really respect. You just heard from him. You heard everything else. I don't want to go on and on. He hates that kind of stuff, but you know, he's a member. He was there at the very beginning of the Armenian Bar Association when it was formed. I believe he was the first person who wrote a check to the Armenian Bar.
He called me first.
Right. And, you know, and we just show we don't forget. Well, our board yesterday has voted to make Walter Karabian Jr. a... Walter Karabian. Sorry, I don't know where the junior came from.
But in case any of you know, keep it to yourself.
Gar, can you join me on this?
Mrs. Karabian will not be happy with that.
Well, Wally joins a select group of individuals, I believe about 20, who are our honorary lifetime members. He may not like the company of some, we're not going to get into that, but he will be joining that list. And I will read, before we do, I'm going to ask my vice chairs, Harry Tikranyan.
Harry, come on up, please, and Michael, you can join us as well. Thank you.
Another Syrian art piece that we love to give to our honorees. I will read to you. The Armenian Bar Association is pleased to honor Walter Karabian with the Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of his distinguished career in public service and his contributions and achievements in the field of law. You are now officially an honorary member of the Armenian Bar Association. Glendale, California, May 19, 2012. Congratulations.
Edwin and Garo, thank you both very much. You're such dedicated members of our community. It makes it even more grateful in my heart that I received this from the two. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Wally. There was no junior on that certificate we gave you. There is no junior, it's secret. I want to say you now join a list of members that are noted in their own right, but none noted in the way Wally Caribbean is noted. In that vein, I'm sure Vartke Siryan will not take offense to that remark by me, who is also here a lifetime member of our organization. I'm going to close by saying the following. We are a national organization, and we strive to be more active internationally because we do have international members, but we are a 501c3 California formed corporation. I think it's appropriate for me to let you all know where our members and board members come from. We have board members from both major cities in Canada, and if I'm missing a major city, I just know of Montreal and Toronto, Harry. Harry, our vice chair, is from Montreal, and Laura Karabalut, our board member, is from Toronto. We have up and down the coast, the eastern coast of the United States, from Boston, our ex officio chairman, Sonia Dersesian, to Rhode Island, which just recognized Garapag, Christine Angustian. We have from New York, Gary Mumjian. We have from Philadelphia, Robert Canusio. We have from Chicago, now in San Francisco, Judge Amy Gugassian. We have in Detroit, Kathy Ossian. And I think the rest of us are here in Southern California. We are fortunate and blessed to have such a large Armenian community to work with. And we look forward to taking our work, join the workforces of our colleagues in different cities around the United States and in Armenia and Artsakh, why not, in the very near future. So please join us this afternoon for a discussion of the Movsesian case, the aftermath, where do we go from here, and do stay around. People tend to fall off as the day goes on. Do stay around for a brief insight from Mr. Sasunyan, and thereafter a somewhat brief discussion by me and our guest of honor, Edik Baghdasaryan, about the elections in Armenia on May 6th, which just took place. Thank you very much for joining us. Please come back.